Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoff Redwoods, series moderator and president of the Futsal Association of Trinidad Tobago. Futsal868 Corner Talks is an online meetup series where global sporting professionals share their experiences and perspectives on the fastest growing indoor sport in the world, futsal. In recent sessions, we expanded to discuss topics of social issues and their relation to sport. Our main objective is to sensitize and educate sports stakeholders on the sport of futsal and other pressing local and global issues. Every day, millions of people participate in sport, such as coaches, athletes, volunteers, referees, and organizers. For the majority, this is a positive experience that develops social networks, confidence, skills, and knowledge. For others, the experience is negative. Today, in episode 32, Futsal868 discusses safeguarding sport with a focus on children and the vulnerable. According to sportanddev.org, a website dedicated entirely to sport and development, child safeguarding in sport has been given too little attention by many clubs, organizations, funding bodies, and governments for a considerable amount of time. The most common reactions being that it does not happen, is someone else's responsibility, or is an isolated incident. These three attitudes are often classified as denial, blame, and minimization. These typical responses leave children, coaches, clubs, and sporting organizations, governments isolated, vulnerable, and in the long term, severely affected. The website further stated, safeguarding children has both a preventative and reactive component, ensuring effective policies, practices, and procedures in place to limit harm occurring, as well as having measures in place to report, investigate, and deal with the suspicions and incidents. Quite a mouthful. Today, we are honored to have two of the Caribbean leaders in the work of safeguarding children in sport. Our guests are Mr. Delroy Alexander, chairman of the Sacred Sports Foundation, which helps disadvantaged young people aged 6 to 25 through inclusive sports development programs. In 2018, he was recognized by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as the 16th Commonwealth Point of Light in honor of his exceptional service through his organization to the Caribbean. Good day, Delroy.
Hi, how you doing, Geoffrey?
I'm fine, thank you, Delroy. Up next, we have Mr. Mark Mungal. I call him Uncle Donny. He is the co-founder and director of the Caribbean Sport and Development Agency. He is presently a board member of Sport for Life TT, a panel member of the First Sports Foundation, and a committee member of the CARICOM Physical Education and Sport Advisory Committee, along with being a good friend and a mentor. We welcome you both, Delroy and Mark. It is an utmost pleasure to have such esteemed guests as yourselves spend Sunday evening with us on Futsal868 Corner Talks. Welcome, gents.
Welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
So let's dive straight into it, because the introduction was a little bit long, but it also gives us a backdrop into those, well, we put two words, safeguarding sport, but that means so much more to you gentlemen who have made your life work as regards to safeguarding sport, but more so the vulnerable in sport. So I ask both of you all your opening remarks as regards to definitions, and then dive straight into it. With Delroy, you first, being our Trinidad guest, as regards to what is your organization doing when it comes to this topic?
Wow, that was a massive lead up. I'm not quite sure what to say. Let me say hi to everybody from here in St. Lucia. Beautiful day, or a little bit rainy, but still beautiful. Safeguarding. Oh, and let me say a quick shout out to all our followers. Today's a special day for Sacred Sports Foundation. The organization was co-founded by myself, my sister, and my brother, Keith Alexander, the first professional black manager in the UK. It would have been Keith's birthday today. So I just want to give a little remembrance to my older brother and the inspiration very much for the foundation. And that kind of leads us into, we have our roots obviously in football, but sports for development is a massive, massive topic. And for us, child safeguarding has become essential to everything we do. The first introduction within the organization itself is a child safeguarding program. One of the things that we began to learn very early on, and I'm sure Mark would echo this, is that sport for most people is a fun and enjoyable, a wonderfully creative and fun experience. But for some, unfortunately, it's not quite so. So one of the things that we have been working on over the past, I would say 6 or 7 years, is to develop policies and principles that ourselves and our partners could share to make sure that all of the people working in our program are safe. And the essential element of sport is pretty much always the same. You want kids to have fun. You want the participants to have fun. But you also, as an organizer and as an administrator, you don't want to bring kids into an environment where they might be at risk. So understanding that risk and putting measures in place is something that we have been pushing for quite a few years alongside Mark, both here in St. Lucia and the Eastern Caribbean. And it's been a real pleasure. It's been a wonderful experience. And the most beautiful thing is that the more work we do in this arena, the more converts we get. And I am happy to say that more and more people are sharing the experience and learning more and more about how they might make small changes to make a big impact on sport for kids in the region.
Mr. Mungal, your turn, sir.
Yeah, thanks again, Geoff, and thanks for organizing this. I think it's really both interesting, but also important that more and more organizations, maybe influenced, I think, a lot by COVID as well, COVID-19. Yeah, more and more organizations are using the opportunity to do some this type of engagement and specifically around safeguarding children in sport, safeguarding children and the people in sport. So good, and good to have my colleague Delroy alongside as well. A pleasure always to work with Delroy. We've colleagues over the past some good years. So as Delroy suggested, yeah, we know that sport is a powerful medium and a powerful environment, and we know that the majority of children and young people enjoy positive experiences from participating in sport. And when we talk about positive experiences, Delroy mentioned the fun part of it, but there's also the development elements of it, so that the education, the health, and all of those other positive outcomes that are aligned to participation in sport. But sadly, and you would agree this as well, Jeff, from the Sport and Dev platform, sadly, there are some people who unfortunately have an unhappy sport experience. And we know this for sure. This is not just Ultra, this is not just you and I having a general conversation. We have a significant amount of research in this sector now. So it's both detailed research and research that would have been pioneered by people like Sierra Brackenridge and others from that sector, but also more current research as well. And then from the media, which we all are fully aware of the things that have been in the media around abuse of children in sport. That tends to be limited to sexual abuse and usually high-profile cases, but it's only one part of the broader dimension. So yeah, so we do know that even in this wonderful and powerful medium sector that we embrace as ours, even though we know that the majority of persons who participate in sport have that positive experience, sadly, some children, some young people, some vulnerable persons, unfortunately, do not have such a positive experience. And so part of our responsibility then as the caretakers of the sports sector is to try to put things in place to safeguard those populations who participate, to make sure that what we do leads to them enjoying a positive experience. And so we do that by, what we call safeguarding. And when we say safeguarding, when we were, this is a almost 16-year journey for for my organization, when we started to work in safeguarding, we never used the term safeguarding, we used the term child protection. And later on, the term safeguarding emerged and evolved, and now we use that term to refer to all of the actions we take to ensure that the children, the young people, the vulnerable persons that we're working with, that they are safe from harm when they're involved in our sport activity. So that when we use the term safeguarding, which is kind of now becoming more and more a universal concept, we are referring to all of those actions that we take to ensure that the children and the young people, all of them, are safe from harm when they're involved in activities or events that we're involved in. And on the other side of that is the term child protection, which is the one that more people are familiar with. And we kind of distinguish between the two. So when we talk about child protection, now we're talking about the things that we do that are required for specific children. These are children who are already at risk. These are at risk for suffering from some form of harm. And we, of course, we're referring to that the sport context here. So we have, just for clarification there, you did ask about the definition. So just for clarification, again, when we talk about child protection, we're really speaking about a set of activities that are required for specific children who are at risk or suffering from harm. And that's the responsibility of experts. So that wouldn't be for you and I to do. That would be for somebody who is considered an expert in child protection. They may be working with UNICEF, for example, or with the Children's Authority in your country, etc. Right? So those are people who have that expertise in that field. Whereas safeguarding, on the other hand, which is the actions that we take to ensure that all of the children, the young people in our programs are safe from harm, that's everybody's responsibility. So just for some clarification there, on the one hand, the child protection, that's the responsibility of experts, and that's specifically for children who are at risk and suffering from harm. But safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, and that's what we do to make sure that all of the children, not just those who are at risk, but all of the children and young people in our programs are safe from harm when they're doing sport programs in our clubs and in our communities. And when we talk about the abuse there, just to be clear about that as well. So oftentimes when we think about abuse in the sport context, because of what's presented in the media, we tend to limit that to sexual abuse. So we're only thinking about one type of abuse. So and abuse is much more than that. And not that that's not serious, obviously that is serious. So when we talk about abuse, and particularly and specifically child abuse, we're referring to acts of commission or omission. So things that you do or that you neglect to do that lead to that child experiencing harm. So the things that you do or that you don't do that may lead to a child experiencing harm. So it comes under that umbrella of what we refer to as abuse. The key thing there that lead to children experiencing harm. And so this is not accidental harm. This is non-accidental harm. So we're not talking here about when they're riding a bicycle and they may fall down and bruise their arm. That's not the type of harm we're referring here. But so we're referring to non-accidental harm. So, and it will include anything from physical, emotional, sexual mistreatment, or lack of care that leads to, again, to injury or to harm, right? So an individual may abuse or neglect a child directly, or may be responsible for abuse because they fail to prevent another person from harming that child. So some the child abuse is something that you directly do, but it's also sometimes when you fail to act to prevent another person from that, you are also facilitating that abuse as well. So that's kind of a nutshell, Jeffrey, of the context of our organization has been on this journey, as I mentioned to you, for the better part of 16 years. And I'll say when we started, we were struggling for support. We couldn't find agencies that were doing this. We realized that we needed to do it because we were working directly with children, young people, and persons with disabilities, very vulnerable population there. And so we found a partner out of the US. That was our first initiation into safeguarding. Well, they called it child protection back then. We've learned a lot along the way, and now our journey we have amazing support both internationally and regionally. Delroy is a part of our supporting system in the region here. Really working hard, not just in St. Lucia, but in some of the Eastern Caribbean states to make sports safer for children and young people. So, Jeffrey, that's just a bit of an introduction there. Shoot away at your question because both Delroy and I have a very good habit of meandering all over the place. So be careful. Ask the right question.
That's that, that's okay. I'm a geographer, so that helps as well. Delroy, first and foremost, let us, a part of Futsal 868, let us we take time to remember your brother, noting very well that because of him, you all are here and you all are doing the work that you all are doing. I'm going to commend you all for doing the great work to the point that the Queen herself has recognized the work that you all done. So his legacy lives on, and that is great for us to be able to experience. We have also recognized your British accent, back in the Caribbean. So I want you to make a link between what you did as regards to safeguarding, the work in safeguarding children in sport in Britain, and also your work when it comes to Sacred Sports Foundation in St. Lucia, giving us some examples, some case studies as regards to what has been the journey along the way when it comes to Delroy Alexander, his family members, and Sacred Sport Foundation.
Boy, it's a long journey, as Mark talks about. The organization, when we started the organization, we really had very, very small aims. It was to run an odd sports development program, work with folks, develop their life skills, do something very simple. As we began to work with local partners and develop, we obviously bought contacts both from the UK and also from the US. I had been living in the US in Chicago, working there. So we brought those contacts with us. And when we returned, we began to work with local youth, and we began to realize a number of serious challenges. And so the program became more and more serious in terms of the development aspects of what we were doing. What we were finding was that a lot of our kids had significant development challenges, and that we felt that our programs could perhaps help do a little bit more than just kick a ball or stroke a ball. That we could help in helping these kids find themselves, and the journey has been both for them and us. One of the things I would really like to put forward to everybody is that this isn't a question of teacher student. We're all students in this field. We're all learning a little bit more each and every day about how to make the things we do safer, how to understand the risks that are involved, and some of the challenges that we face: resources, equipment, the environment. All of these things pose significant challenges. And as we develop our programs, we began to run into some of those. And our journey in safeguarding really began not in the UK, it began here in St. Lucia. We had a girls program, and we had a number of experts from overseas working with the girls. And we began doing goal setting exercises with these girls, and some disturbing scenarios began to arise. We as an organization, and this was many, many years ago, over a decade ago now, we began to realize that some of these issues we were ill-equipped to deal with. We tried our best, but we ourselves did not have policies and procedures in place at that time. And we began to realize that there was a significant deficiency in some of our program planning and some of the program planning of our partners that we were working with. Because, one of the things that happens in sport and with our youngsters is that once you start working with kids and they trust you as their coach, all sorts of personal and private things come to the fore. And if you're not well equipped to deal with those issues, it can be extremely troubling, both for the child and for the people involved in the program. And that was exactly the situation that we found ourselves in. So that case, it really traumatized my sister, who is the executive director, myself, and others around the program. And we began to ask ourselves, you know what, if we're dealing with kids and we don't have policies and procedures in place, we're really doing them a disservice. And that began a long journey into looking at what other people were doing to safeguard children, to put in place the kind of safeguards so that when kids came to the program, not only were they safe while they were with us, but all of those people around the program were equipped well to deal with some of the social and emotional and physical challenges that the kids might face. And that is no mean feat. When we started out, it felt like a massive mountain. And for us, in fact, we stopped for maybe about a year and a half. We stopped doing any girls programs at all because we were that concerned about understanding some of the challenges that we faced. And we set ourselves a challenge. We said, you know what, we're not going to do any programs in that sphere until we are confident that we can both help keep those kids safe, and if issues arise, we have proper policies and procedures in place. And I would say this to any sports administrator listening in, any coach, any athlete. If you are in a situation and you don't understand the risks, if you don't understand the challenges that may face you, trying to deal with them as they come is a less than perfect scenario. So putting some basic policies and procedures in place was the first step for us. And Mark, we were very thankful that people like Mark really helped us understand what was available, some of the skills that were available here in the Caribbean, and were a big support to us to keep pushing and keep developing. Over the years, we have since developed a program where child safeguarding is at the heart of what we do. So if I give you a classic example, when we start a program, the first thing we do when we do recruitment is ensure folks have the right skills, have a police credit check, a police check, and those sorts of things, so that we're aware of who we're bringing around the program. And a lot of our programs are run by young men and women that we have trained somewhere between the ages of 18 and 26, 27. So that requires us to have a significant investment in training our young mentors. And child safeguarding not only sets the environment for the participants, it helps set the environment for our mentors and our coaches and our administrators. When folks realize that that's the first thing that you are introduced to, it sets the values of the organization. It allows us to weed out folks that perhaps aren't suited to work in this environment, to say to them, hey, maybe you need a little bit more training, maybe you need to take some other things on board before you join our programs. And it also allows folks to realize that we take it extremely seriously, that while the programs are fun and about self-development and leadership and communication and those sorts of things, the most important thing that we must ensure is that we don't do any harm to the kids that come to our programs. So that introduction at the very beginning of our programs has become absolutely fundamental. We have felt it necessary to continue that training so that everybody in the organization now takes formal child safeguarding training, both online and in person. And we have developed to the point where we now train a range of organizations, both locally and in the region, helping them how can I put, just address some of the risks that they face and put in simple policies in place. I can continue to keep going, but I hope that gives you a sense of where we started. We started from a particular problem where we faced the challenge that many people feel. It feels daunting. It feels really, really like a massive uphill battle. I'm happy to say to you, it's not that difficult. Once you make the commitment, you can really make big strides. And that simple things, putting simple policies and procedures in place can really help safeguard yourselves and the participants that come to your programs. And that very literal situation that we face is something that I'm happy to say we have avoided since. That doesn't mean that we're perfect, and I want to go back to that idea that we're all learning. We're all on a journey. We are not the teachers. We are learning as much from the participants as they are from us, and that what we are trying to do is share some experiences of the things that we think have helped make our programs substantially better. And we think that they are simple things, cost-effective things that can help other people's programs.
You spoke as regards to commitment. You also spoke as regards to the Caribbean and what the Caribbean, helping other Caribbean nations or states, as well as your international work. Where is the Caribbean in this context, in this topic? Are we committed as a region to be able to have the uncomfortable discussion as regards to protecting children, as regards to sport? Where are we, Mark?
Well, let's say that I like to use that same analogy. Delroy says we are on a journey. So, and for different, the truth is that the Caribbean is a complex place, Jeff. It's not a broad brush that we can easily say the Caribbean when we refer to some things. And if we just look at policy, for example, if I do a quick assessment of let's say the CARICOM member states, of 14 odd CARICOM countries, we have, in terms of national safeguarding children in sport policy, Guyana, and that's recent, and I don't think they've begun to implement. Similarly, St. Kitts and Nevis, brand new, hot off the press, and Anguilla, probably one of the better working government policies that we have in the region. Now, that is not to say that the others haven't maybe attempted to or made some effort. But the truth is that if you do an assessment and if you take any national sports policy document from the region and do a search for the term safeguarding or child protection, you'll be shocked to see, well, sometimes nothing, sometimes a one-liner. And so in that sense, the journey is different for different territories within the Caribbean context. I'll have to say that when we started this journey in earnest, and remember, I'm saying we here as a Caribbean organization, we're based in Trinidad, but our work has been regional. And when we started the journey and we looked for support, we found an organization out of the US. It was then the National Alliance for Youth Sport, but they had an international sort of, it was almost a kind of flip-flop. You know how the US is, right? So it wasn't an umbrella international organization. The national organization was the body, and within that body, they had an international alliance for youth sport. But they were really good support in the early days because they provided us with training materials around child protection and safeguarding, and a range of support systems. The challenge was that it was based on a US structure and an operating system. And so we tried to use that and adapt it to Trinidad and to the other Caribbean territories. And when you just take the training material, we were plugging in a video. That's a long time thing. So we had a VHS videotape. We plug it into a big box TV in a conference room somewhere or classroom that we were doing the session. And if it was a workshop that we were doing, let's say for the National Volleyball Federation, all of the materials that our US partner would send would be based on volleyball. But it was always, and I'm not saying this to be disrespectful to white people or anything like that, right? But the presenters were always North American, male, white, usually old, and speaking to Caribbean people and the dynamic just didn't cut it for us. The contextually just wasn't right, and then the examples they use, the U.S. sports system is totally different from our Caribbean sports systems, right? So, and then even in the system that they had, where if there was an issue with a coach, there was a level one of intervention and arbitration, and then another level, and then a third level. There was an insurance element and a legal element, but we couldn't use any of that because it wasn't part of our local system. In addition to which, it was quite expensive, and we were starting to absorb costs to do this because we wanted to do it. And I guess very early on we recognized that this is something that we have to do ourselves. And that's when the team or team at the time started to work towards putting things in place. We reached out to other partners, and I'll have to recognize our colleagues from UK Sport and UNICEF, who were solid partners, as well as the Australian Sports Commission. They were really good partners. And I say good partners because they didn't tell us what to do. They listened to us, and in fact, we've worked together, and we've continued to work together up to this day. Both Delroy and I actually are members of the UNICEF International Advisory Board for the International Safeguard for Children in Sport. And we are there because of the voice and the value that the Caribbean adds, and has been adding since, before 2010. So from a global perspective, the Caribbean, I think, is well recognized for the work that we're doing in safeguarding. In fact, we're considered to be one of the leaders in this safeguarding work globally, and called upon all the time to support global initiatives. The challenge is that a lot of that effort, because both Delroy and I, who are part of a very small team of champions in the region, because we are outside of Olympic movement, we are outside of the government system, we are non-profit NGOs. And so all of the work that we do, to a large extent, we're doing it based on, a commitment to this, but we really have no local standing. I can't tell a government minister what to do. I can't tell the Olympic committees what to do. Notwithstanding, and the irony of that is that in the global sector, we've been called on to serve at Commonwealth level, at UN level, so intergovernmental agency level. We both have been serving, but we're also being called upon by those same international governing bodies, the IOC and FIFA and others, to support their work around safeguarding. But locally in the Caribbean and in each of our territories within the Caribbean, it's we're not engaged in the same way. It's usually a bit of an uphill battle. But
so so let me jump in here with that one. Let me ask this question to both you and Delroy. Is and this is a two-part question I really want to ask, and I'm going to go hard in now. You're being loved more outside than you're loved inside, right? That's what I'm basically hearing. So my question to you is, what is going to get our leaders, the other stakeholders, the decision makers within Caribbean sports, to understand what's happening? And the second part of that question is, are we, given the fact that United States gymnastics, based on research, is about 2 decades of issues laid legally towards one person, but there are other persons as well, Mr. Larry Nassar. Yes, are we a volcano ready to erupt when it comes to issues around safeguarding in sport? And I see you smiling there, Delroy. And Uncle Mark, I didn't mean to cut you, but I'm those two questions really concern me. They really have concern to me. One, how come you're being loved outside more than outside of your home, more than inside of your home? One. And two, is there a volcano ready to erupt in the Caribbean when it comes to safeguarding children in sport?
Boy, you know how to ask the tough questions, man. Let me put it this way.
That's my job.
Let me put it this way. When it comes to the region, we are actually a leader in many respects. The reality of our financial position means that whenever folks like Mark and myself come and say, hey, child safeguarding is something that we need to address, the first perhaps challenge that you face is a real financial barrier, because immediately policymakers are thinking, oh boy, what is that going to cost me? How am I going to budget that? Who am I going to get to do that? And so forth. So you face a challenge like that. I can tell you, I can only speak to some of the organizations that we've worked with. For the last couple of years, we have been working very closely with our Ministry of Youth Development and Sport. We have trained all of their coaches for the last couple of years in child safeguarding and delivered a level 2 certification program to them. We are in discussions to try and get them to work with Mark and others to introduce broader policies. But that is a very challenging scenario. I can tell you here in St. Lucia, the Children's Act changed recently, and things are improving the Caribbean wide. The real question we have to ask ourselves is not whether we're a volcano ready to pop. The research is there. There are cases in all of our country where coaches, administrators, athletes have raised significant issues. The question for us is how we avoid the kind of scandal that is currently happening in South Africa, that has happened in UK gymnastics, that has happened in gymnastics in America. There's no reason. There's
allegations in Haiti.
Yes.
There's present allegations in Haiti.
But there's no reason to think that statistically we're any different from anywhere else in the world. The question is how we address that. Mark and I have taken the position that we're not going to wait. We're not going to wait for a governmental body or an international organization to say to us, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing it? We have taken the lead and said, when it comes to anybody working with us, they are going to have the right safeguards in place. That doesn't mean to say we're perfect, but that means to say we are thinking and committed to making the environment better for the kids that come to our program. In terms of, and Mark has done a massive amount of work working with regional governments. It is a little bit disappointing that we have not adopted more of some of that work, but I believe that with the growing reality that the IOC, FIFA, and other international organizations are adopting significant policies, which we are part of inputting, that the region is on the cusp of a significant change. That as sport changes, I know for us as an organization, we are broadening our work to work with local schools, the schools that we work with, saying to them, hey, do you have a child safeguarding policy? Let's work together and put one in place. We are beginning to broaden that scope and say, hey, there are things that we can do to address significant risks that aren't necessarily going to cost us massive amounts of sums, but will give us some sense of certainty and understanding about how big a challenge we may face in the future. And that question, you see, that question that you pose, I think that is in the back of a lot of administrators' minds. Boy, if I go into this subject, what might I uncover? Where might this lead? I flip it the other way. If you don't go into this subject, what are you going to say to that parent who comes to you as an administrator and says, Mr. Alexander, you the same person that put this coach in front of my child. What did you do to make sure this coach or this administrator or this youth mentor was trained and understood some of the challenges that they may face. And I often say to when we work with partners, both here and in places like St. Vincent and Grenada and places like that, when we work with partners, I say to them, you might think this is a benefit to the kids. The first and primary benefit is to the organization, because once you put the safeguards in place, you as an administrator begin to realize, boy, some of the risks I was taking in the past, it was just madness. Why was I putting myself in those situations? So what I have found, the more we have done work, the more people we have bought into this culture, the more chance we have had to discuss the reality. Under the surface, it's there. Everybody knows it's there. And they just don't have the tools to deal with it. Once they realize there's people willing to help at a reasonable cost, and where Mark and I are concerned, it's pretty much free. So the cost couldn't get much better. But once they realize there's a framework around which you can tackle those challenges, that can put in place very simple safeguards to help deal with some of the risks that you face, you start to see the culture change. You start to see people who used to avoid talking about the subject pull you to one side and say, hey, we've got a situation, can you help? And oftentimes it's not a question of myself or Mark being the expert. It's a question of being able to say, hey, the people you need to speak to are at the Department of Human Services. Here's a number, speak to this person. If you don't get a follow-up, let me know and I will follow up. So it's not always a question of it being a personal responsibility. There is a network out there. We just have to help develop it further, strengthen it, and expand it.
Quite interesting. And as I said before, we even came on air, an hour is not enough. An hour is totally not enough. We have so much to do. But as always, we now go into the why. And in doing some research for this show, we came up with this graphic from, again, the Facebook site that we'll be sharing some videos on as regards to safeguarding children in sport. To the why. Why should we safeguard children? And we definitely will be sharing this on our social media pages. And before we go to break, Mark, I would like you to touch on a few of these points, because as with everything else, it is always the foundation of what we do. The why.
Yeah, just before I make that point, just to be, you cut me off before I finished up the point. No, it's important because we have to be balanced in what we see. And I think Delroy picked up on it, but just to be clear, we have had cooperation and collaboration with many of our regional governments, CARICOM member states, including CARICOM and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, so and other regional bodies as well. I think it's and a lot of that work, I have to say though, has been around education. So what we've done across many of the Caribbean territories, mainly in partnership with either Departments of Youth and Sport or Departments of Education, is that we've done that basic safeguarding education awareness. And if ever we have to do a workshop in any of the regions, whether it's a workshop for physical education teachers or for youth sport coaches or for sport administrators, we always include a module, and it's not a superficial module, it's a comprehensive module, but we always include a module on safeguarding and protection of children in sport. So just to say that as well, there are several other agencies that have been doing good work in the region. He asked about the region. And one is Cricket West Indies. They've actually been, I would consider them to be a leader as well in some of the work that they've done around safeguarding and child protection cricket, working with primary schools in particular through the kiddie cricket program. So all of the coaches who've been part of that have benefited from safeguarding training in partnership with UNICEF. And in more recent times, we've had CONCACAF on board. Just and CONCACAF as an umbrella organization, you're talking about working in 41 countries. So that the impact of their work, and again facilitated through some of the support that we have provided for them for their coaching education, is being rolled out. Every time I travel up and down the islands, as recently as just before the lockdown, I was in Anguilla and in St. Kitts and Nevis, and in both cases, people who I would not have known, who would have been part of a workshop that I was doing, but who would have benefited from either Cricket West Indies safeguarding or CONCACAF safeguarding workshop. So there is work that's being done. The challenge is that it's primarily around education, which is good. We need to now put some structures in place to address some of the things that Delroy talked about. To the question about why should I?
Of course.
So, well, again, you know, that it's important that we're not doing this just because it's something that we feel that we should be doing. These are things that one of the things in the slide that you showed there talked about human rights. So children are human beings, and they are embedded in that UN Convention on the Rights of the Child are several statements that are aligned to participation in sport. They have the right to, well, we shorten it to say the right to play for clarity, but they also have the right to equitable treatment and all of those other human rights. And so if the right to be able to participate free from harm. And so all of that should be embedded in creating what we would say is a safe and positive environment in the sport context. So, and all of the other things that you have in that shared in that slide there. I don't think we have any challenge about why we need to do this. I think the real challenge is why we're not doing some of the things that we need to do. And I'm seriously challenged by the governments that have not as yet, because we've been meeting with them for the better part of almost 2 decades. Almost every single year, sometimes twice for the year, we would convene a meeting of directors of sport from throughout the region. We would have CARICOM come on board to help host this meeting. And for the better part of a decade, we've had directors of sport each state that they commit to doing this. And the challenge for me is that some of them have moved to doing it, as I mentioned to you, some of the territories, but some of them are still falling woefully short. And I think we are at a time now, you know, that, and Delroy will forgive me because I start to lose that. It's not patience, but you know, I think it's unnecessary diplomacy. We tiptoe around things because we don't want to harm the relationships we have with governments. We want to work with them, and we do want to work with them. But you know, in any good relationship, you also need to be honest. And honestly, we're not doing enough. We absolutely are not doing enough for this. And if we start to dig deep and really collect the data about the children who are being abused, because we know of cases, and in fact, we do have local data. So about 2014, we did a Caribbean child protection sports survey and collected data. And so there is evidence, and it's not a little bit. We have evidence that 90% of the persons who participated in this survey were aware of at least one form of emotional abuse happening to children in their sphere in the sports sector, and so on. So, in fact, all of the data that we collected in the region was quite similar to data collected in Europe and specifically in UK around the same. In fact, we asked similar questions just to be able to. We used their one of the original questionnaires developed for another research done out in the UK for our Caribbean study. And so the data is similar. We have similar patterns of information. So we can't deny that it's happening, right? So we know it's happening, and we know why we need to address this. The main challenge, I think, for us is why aren't we putting things in place? What are those obstacles? What are the things that are preventing us? And Delroy talked about a critical one, resources. And I think that we could overcome that if we are creative, as it is now. Both Delroy's organization and CSD, we are doing this with literally pro bono for 2 decades. So if non-profit organizations without revenue streams could be doing this, why aren't the international federations, the national governing bodies, the governments across the region, why aren't they themselves also taking this a little more seriously? Yes, we're getting traction. We are seeing some progress. We're seeing greater awareness. We are now working with our National Olympic Committee in Trinidad here, as well as part of an approach to move towards making sports safer for children. We'll see how that goes. And I think regionally we're seeing a little more traction as well. I think we're getting pressure as well from the international federation. So now FIFA big is a big player in the scheme of things, and the IOC both have safeguarding agendas that will start to trickle down, I think, in a little more direct way, and that will influence, and that's what we need, quite frankly. If FIFA and the IOC, just those two buggers, if FIFA and the IOC take a strong position and say, listen, as a member association, you can only participate in our competitions, you can only benefit from our development funding, etc., 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 if you put these safeguarding things in place. It will happen like that. And what is preventing them from doing that? I asked the question last year at a forum in Geneva. Why aren't they taking a harsh position, a strong position, not a harsh, a strong principled position, as they would have done, for example, with anti-doping? You can't take part in any international competition if you don't have your anti-doping things in place. So why aren't we doing it to protect children? This is the future of sport. And remember, when we don't look after these things then erode this sector, and then challenge the integrity of this. Do you think how many children parents you would imagine after those scandals would want to have their children involved in sport? After the Larry Nassar scandal, after the scandals in South Africa, after the scandals in the football associations in the UK, how many parents now must be second guessing Vietnam? I wonder if I should send my daughter to do gymnastics again, boy, or to play football in the academy, boy. So if we don't do things to protect the integrity of sport, we now also hurt in sport. So it's in our interest, not only the interest of protecting children, but for those of us who work in this sector, to also protect the integrity of this sector. Otherwise, it will, fall on its own sword.
It's in 32 episodes, this is the second time that we have gone over 50 minutes without taking a break. And it clearly shows again that, gentlemen, I'm going to do something I have never done before. I'm going to beg you all to come to our show before the end of the year. We have already booked shows for the end of the year. But I think that given the fact that we have not even delved into the meat of the matter, where segment 2 was supposed to speak to education, policy, and awareness, it really is important for me to be able to stop for a moment, breathe, and say, please allow us the opportunity to have that segment another day, because again, it's so much to discuss, but yet the show continues. So think about it while we continue the show. But we're going to take a quick break as we listen to one major stakeholder in this discussion as regards to safeguarding children, and she comes from the European Council, the Council of Europe, as she tells us a little more when it comes to in the celebration on August the 8th. You're watching Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoff Edwards. We have with us Delroy from St. Lucia and Uncle Donny here in Trinidad Tobago. We'll be right back.
Most children love and enjoy sport. Sport brings many benefits to children, but it can also put them at risk. The media has reported on many terrible cases of sexual abuse of girls and boys in sport. When people hear about them, they wonder why it took the victims so many years to speak. There are many reasons for that. Many children fear the consequences if they talk. They may also feel guilty. Some children are so young that they do not understand what's happening to them. Most of them do not know where to seek help. The Council of Europe is helping public authorities and sports organizations to improve laws and policies and to adopt child safeguarding measures. These measures are there to prevent abuse in the first place. They also make sure that children and others can share their concerns and that action will be taken if something goes wrong. Mark the Safer Sport Day on the 8th of August, and next time you bring your children to practice sport, ask the club about their child safeguarding policy. Keeping children safe is everyone's responsibility. If you value sport, make sure that sport upholds values.
make sure that sport uphold values. That along with, if it is you bringing your children to sport, what is there to be able to protect your child? Delroy, I ask you, what, with us skipping segment 2, how can Caribbean sporting organizations make children safe?
Boy, you know, obviously, we would be happy to share whatever experiences we have on the program moving forward. You know, I would say a couple of really simple things. The first commitment that we ask people before we even deliver a child safeguarding course, you know, the first thing we ask people that want to join the organization, we have a one-page, a very simple code of conduct. It sets out the values that the organization believes in. Please don't drink around kids. Please don't swear around kids. Please be disciplined. Please be on time. Please treat the kids with respect. Remember that the kids are humans. Simple things. And we ask people to sign those almost immediately. We say, read it. If you have a problem signing it, please let us know. We're happy to discuss it. But those are so simple values that we believe almost anybody should almost immediately be able to sign on to those. And I can tell you that is one of the most important things that we did as an organization. Ask anybody, and that is a volunteer, a coach, an administrator, a youth mentor, anybody. We say, here, this is the first form you need to read. Take a read. That's the values of the organization. A simple one-page form with maybe 15 sentences on it. We ask you to sign and date it. And we have found that is the first kind of thing that comes into our head when people start to question, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, this is a problem for me. And it's a simple thing for us. We say, well, maybe this isn't the right organization for you. And it really is a massive safeguard, because people who come to sport with other agendas, they immediately realize, boy, I need to watch out. This is an organization that might be onto me if I'm up to something that I shouldn't be up to. And it has helped safeguard us in many regards. So that is one simple thing, a simple code of conduct. We're happy to share ours. Mark has them. You know, nothing, it doesn't have to be. I mean, I have noticed with a little bit distress that as more and more people get involved, these conducts seem to be getting longer and longer. We have continued to keep ours at a single page because we want people to be able to address the issues very simply and understand what the organization stands for. The second most important thing for us was developing our own policy. We developed a policy that set out what would happen if certain things happen. Because it's so, you know, when you get into sport, you get into it to have fun. For us, you see, we came to sport not to develop wonderful footballers, but to develop wonderful human beings. So for us, it was a critical part of what we did to say, listen, if we are working with kids, we don't just want to have a wonderful environment. We want to have human beings that are around them that understand the values that we want to give to our kids. We want to be able to say to parents, listen, these are the kinds of things that we stand for. And one of the things that we have realized in and around sport, everything is fine until it's not fine. Until something goes wrong, more times than not, nobody even thinks about it twice. We are on the other side of that fence. We are preparing for the what if. We are preparing a simple ground policies. And so we ask, and we give a lot of kit and equipment away. And what we have done, before we used to just give that equipment away to football clubs, cricket clubs, organizations. Now it comes with strings. We say, hey, if you want the equipment, if you want the free training, you have to come to some of our workshops. Again, we're not charging folks to come, you know. We say, listen, it's free. And one of the most beautiful things I can say about our Caribbean people is that once they have experienced the learning experience, they want more. Rather than them saying, boy, this is giving me a headache, they say, boy, this is something I've been looking for the longest while. I need more of this. When can we do this again? Can you come and speak to my executive? Can you share this with other people in the district? So I am very positive about the possibilities. And I believe a massive sea change is upon us. There's no doubt that FIFA, 203 organizations around the world, is saying to their organizations, we're giving you plenty money. This is something that you have to do. And they are about to equip every member association. So they're in Trinidad and the other 50 organizations around the region, they'll all have specialists involved in safeguarding. The key for us is to make sure they're properly trained and culturally trained, that we don't take on board things that are not relevant to our experience. You know, the reality of our sports experience is one that often is forged from hardship and toil, that we don't necessarily, we might not have the best kit, we might not have the best equipment, but our work ethic, our approach is first class, and we can overcome where other people might not. And we have to remember what our cultural approach is. And so I see many positives. The IOC, I see them coming on board. As Mark says, you would prefer that they take a little stronger position, but it's understandable. They have a lot of members, a lot of things to deal with. You know, a lot of our sports organizations, sometimes they're not the best managed. Sometimes they don't have the right personnel in place. It takes time. Mark and myself are here to help. One of the things that we should say is we have done this work free of charge, but there is a significant cost to it. We have worked with major international partners. For us, I can speak to FIFA Football, FIFA Foundation. I can speak to UEFA Foundation for Children. I can speak to the Maria Holden Memorial Trust. These are organizations that have supported our child safeguarding work, both internally and also the outreach programs. So there are organizations there that understand the benefits. The UNICEFs, the other organizations that have supported us and helped, they're there. The time is right for us to make the changes. If we're not careful, international organizations will start telling us what to do when we already can do it ourselves. And what I would like to see is more and more of those government agencies accepting that responsibility. Not being so much worried about the fear. The big challenge for us, and it is a significant challenge, is way outside of our remit. It comes with social services. One of the bigger challenges that this movement creates for society is that there are inevitably going to be new and fresh situations that develop. And our social services need to have the resources to cope with that. And that is a commitment that governments must make. If we are, because it is like so many areas that we get into, we raise the expectation of our populations, we raise the expectation of our athletes, our sports men and women, our kids. And then when push comes to shove, we say, boy, we can't help you. We're not ready for you. Come back next week, soon come. We can't do that with a subject like this. These are significant emotional, social, physical challenges that we face. We must have a system in place. Mark and I can help, but we can only go so far. It does require governments to match our commitment with their commitment. I like to think we push and prod them behind the scenes. Programs like this, where we talk about it more publicly, I think are critical. So I thank you for your efforts and your energy. It's a vital part of the advocacy work that we all do.
Thank you very much for that, Delroy. So, Mark, I'm in your country. You know me personally. I lead an organization, Futsal Association of Trinidad Tobago, but I don't have a policy. Where do I go from here?
Jeff, I want to just endorse all of what Del just shared there. And I think, well, I mean, we're on the same page here. The truth is that there are several options that they have, but very early on we talked about being on that safeguarding journey. We've worked together to publish something. This is at a global level. Published this in 2014. It's now you referenced it. You referenced some of the work, and when Elder Marina from Council of Europe spoke, she spoke to what was developed back in 2014, that we now refer to as the International Safeguards for Children in Sport. That's a comprehensive, not voluminous, but comprehensive document that gives guidelines to any organization that wants to start their safeguarding journey. There are 8 safeguards that are clearly outlined and articulated, and it is available on that on the Sport and Development website, that Sport and Dev website that you would have referenced early on. So that's a real good starting point for anybody that wants to begin their safeguarding journey. Download the international safeguards, and it includes then guidelines for policy, so for your safeguarding policy, guidelines for how do you respond to concerns, guidelines for partnerships, etc. Right? So very clearly articulated, and it's user friendly. And then you have, luckily for you, Jeff, you have me around, right? So you would have already have had 2 of your staff participating in one of our safeguarding efforts early on at the end of last year. Del was actually here as well, along with several of our colleagues, including the head of safeguarding at FIFA, and another persons who are considered the global champions for this safeguarding children in sport effort. And 2 of your staff members were actually at that session, participating actively in the breakout and so on. So that's the other thing. Invest in education. You can't go wrong with that. And there's a lot of it available now online that you can access. And then you can access me, as the same way you can access Del, you can access me, I'm right here. And as I've shared with you and with others, there's a process that if for organizations that starts with an audit. So we have a globally accessible audit tool that we use. It's modified from one of our international partners. And that then gives us a breakdown linked to those same 8 international safeguards, where you are in that journey. So where are you in terms of policy? Where are you in terms of staff and recruitment? Where are you in terms of having a system to respond to concerns, which is a huge one. Because after we do the education and awareness, if an issue comes up in your organization, what do you do? How do you respond? They'll refer to the social services, because that's a key part of it. If you have a child who is suffering from harm, you're not a child protection expert, you're not a guidance officer or psychologist, but there are people in the system that have to be part of this team effort. And so I want to emphasize that part of it as well, that if we have to do this locally, regionally, that we have to make a commitment to collaborate. And it's one of the challenges that we find within the sports sector, because sport by its very nature is competitive. Everybody wants to win. And so some organizations we want to do this by ourselves and show that we can do it well. This is not, as Delroy was suggesting, this is not one of the games that we play in like that. This is a different game. This game requires that we put the children in the center, and all of us are around supporting and protecting and safeguarding. And if one drops out, we then create that gap. And so it really is critical that we commit to that collaboration. So government agencies, departments of sport, ministries of sport and youth, etc., governing bodies, including NOCs and the national sports federations, etc., non-profit organizations like Sacred Sport Foundation, the Caribbean Sport and Development Agency, children's authorities, etc., all have to work together to help safeguard children. And I like that. That just popped in my head there, but that idea of all of us ring-fenced around the children to safeguard them. And if one drops out, well, you realize that we create a weakness. So it's really important that we hold hands and work together on this, collaborate. I'll just add in closing there, I think we might be running out of time, but just to say that we've been working on a regional system that's based on what some of the things that Delroy shared to you, we call Safe Stamp. And the idea is that individuals and organizations who work with children in sport must be safe stamp certified. And if they are, then they become part of a database that's searchable. So that if you come to coach my children and I say, well, Jeffrey, let me just check on, see, but you're not registered, you don't have your safe stamp certification. So I'm sorry, you're not safe stamp certified. And similarly for organizations. And we've identified criteria for individuals, some of which Delroy spoke about, criteria for organizations to be part of that database. It's something that we've been working on, and hopefully 2021 will bring us some better success, because I think we are at a bit of a tipping point in that regard. But I think, that it's time for us to move to commit a little better to adopting that safe stamp model. And of course, we don't have time for us to get into detail, but something that we could talk about maybe at another session.
Definitely, we'll have to have another session. And gentlemen, before we come to your closing remarks, I just want to highlight, even though we may be out of time, the 8 international safeguarding standards that is out there for the sake of our viewers. So we're going to just take a short break to highlight this for you all. #SafeInSport, the 8 international safeguarding principles. Closing remarks, Delroy.
I want to say thank you for inviting me. This has been a really interesting discussion. And I would just like to give a message to any administrator, coach, athlete thinking about where they might begin. Everything begins with yourself. You can make the difference. You can help your organization change. It doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require that much time. It requires a commitment to want to keep kids safe. We all want the best for our children. And I want to leave a little message of hope for all those coaches that have gone on this journey with us. It is a massive, tremendous pleasure I take in seeing the small changes that coaches have made that have made significant supporting efforts for our children. And in their smiles, in their ability to be open with us about the challenges that they face, we create a much better, safer sport, and we also create a much better, safer environment. And I hope that If there's one thing you can do today, it is take that first step. Reach out, do something, make your environment that little bit safer. It really makes a massive difference to our kids.
Johnny? No, that was too beautiful for me to say anything after that. That was absolutely beautiful. Of course, as we often say, safeguarding and protecting children in sport is critical, not just for the children who benefit from it, but for the sports sector. And making sports safer for children is not the responsibility of coaches alone, or of parents alone, or of lawmakers. It's everybody's responsibility. And I think if we really and truly want to make sports safer for children, we have to make that commitment to work collaboratively to put safeguards in place. And I think that's the only way that we can really make this happen and see that change that we want to see. So I think, Jeff, really, thanks for doing this. Again, you've given us another opportunity and a platform for sharing things that Delroy and I often have regular conversations on the phone. But you've given us an opportunity to air this in the public domain. And for that, we're really thankful to you and to your team at Futsal868. So congrats on the great work that you're doing. And to my brother Delroy, thank you, my brother, for sharing this hour and a bit with us and for sharing your insightful perspectives. It was an absolute pleasure.
Well, it was certainly a pleasure. On behalf of the Futsal868 family, I want to say thank you very much. And gentlemen, as I said before, the meat and potatoes, we haven't even gotten into it. So again, I'm pleading with you all to give us another time to be able to have further discussions whereby we can be able to educate, make aware of this important topic. We thank God for your riches. We ask God for your richest blessings to you and your families during these weird times. As the year comes to an end, we want to say thank God that we are alive. And so once again, Delroy, Mark, thank you very much. And we'll see you all soon. Have a good one. So that was Mr. Delroy Alexander, as well as Mr. Mark Mungal, two stalwarts when it comes to this work that is important to protecting our children. So you may ask, why am I wearing blue? It's in celebration of World Diabetes Day, which was commemorated yesterday, the 14th of November, Nurses and Diabetes, where in 2020, the World Diabetes theme is Nurses Make the Difference for Diabetes. We want to make sure that, please, like everything else, take care of yourselves. And to our Hindu brothers and sisters, Happy Diwali, which was also celebrated yesterday. Shubh Diwali to one and all. We want to say thank you very much for being with us on another beautiful Sunday. But as you know, with everything else, we continue to make a stance against racism. We cannot and we will not end any show because we are going to keep our feet on the neck of racism.
It is our responsibility to commit to making a positive
difference in our society.
Listen, breathe,
and be a standing voice against discrimination
and injustices. I am Yannick Quintal.
I am Joash Webb.
I am Neil Pro.
I am Kevin Usman.
I am Safia Sylvester, and racism
ends
with me.
I always get goosebumps to see our family, the Futsal868 family, making that pledge to end racism because it starts and it definitely ends with me. Again, my name is Geoffrey Edwards, President of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago, wishing you all another great week ahead. May God continue to richly bless you and yours. Have a good evening.